Okay, so this is a generic T-34 video covering the first steps to creating the suspension. So mostly the paper parts and the installation of the front axle. So we're going to start out by taking our 1/8 drill bit and just reconfirming that these holes in the back are large enough to get it through now that we've re-hardened them. Sometimes they're a little bit tougher. So just re-drill out these back holes first. And you'll notice that I have a large amount of 7mm hole punch discs in front of me. If you can punch them out of a thicker gauge of cardboard, like still cereal box gauge, but just when I was talking originally about selecting cereal boxes, if you have a slightly thicker one, it's not a bad idea to use it because the main use of them now is to create space between the body and where the wheels go on. And so it's good to have them nice and thick. So once you've got that bored out on both sides, just cut back this so you got a nice flat plane, because the next thing we're going to do is cut one of these hole punch discs. Now usually these come out of the hole punch a little bit flexed, so you might want to unflex them and then cut one, not in half so much as slightly offset, because you're probably going to need a little bit more than half a hole punch disc to sit on here flush. And so what you want to do is glue that flush to there. But first, let's see for the other side. I'll need a slightly smaller one. The other side is about half, but this side here is a little bit bigger, and it should be able to take the whole size of that. Before we glue this in, what we're going to do is we're going to take our scraper blade, and we're just going to pop a little triangle chunk out of the middle of the flat plane to meet up with the hole that we just enlarged. So let's glue that in place and give it some time to dry. This is the side, I believe. Oh, that's right. So you really want to make sure that it's pressed in well on all sides. So you can take a clothespin and kind of just use its pressure, since you can't really fit your finger in tight against the side of the hull. You can tighten it by using this, and then just leave that on there to glue after you make sure there's no gaps. Now I have it facing up this way because we're going to be using this part of the hull in a second. Okay, next we're going to bore out this with a bamboo skewer. You can also use your bit to open it up, but it doesn't hurt it to just push through with the skewer, and it's a little bit quicker. And now that this is backing it, you're not in any danger of breaking through this part. And once you've got the holes in place, you might want to enlarge them a little bit because this needs to be large enough to accept a matchstick. And as you can see, the matchsticks are quite a bit bigger than the skewer. But they're also of a softer kind of wood. And so generally, if you try to actually enlarge it with the matchstick, you'll just end up shrinking the matchstick rather than enlarging the hole. Especially if you've got any glue residue on there, which hardens the cardboard up quite a bit. So you can do it like that by just sort of moving the skewer back and forth, or you can even enlarge it a little bit with your drill bit. Just rub it against one side like a file. What you don't want to do is when you're pushing your matchstick through, so you have to come in one side and you have to exit from the other. You don't want to push a whole bunch of material out with the matchstick. Because you can't really have a sharpened end on the matchstick. Okay, so once you've got an acceptable area there, you want to cut this matchstick at 36 millimeters. And just smooth it off a bit. Push that through. And sometimes it can be challenged to get it to punch out the other side without pushing a whole bunch of material out. So just try to support it and then push it through. And once you've got a little bit of matchstick on each side, before you bother trying to center it back and forth a bunch of times, take some 2-to-1 or 4-to-1 glue and just put it all around the base of where the match is meeting the hull, so that when you do move it back and forth a bit, you're going to end up gluing it in place. And now, while you've got a moment, try to set it so that there's an equal amount coming out of each side. Approximation is fine. Just try to get it even, and then leave that to dry. So I've got this already done, and these are dry. And so what you want to do is take your bit and wait for these to dry, and they're solid backing. And you want to just bore out each side. And like, I would brace my thumb there until you can start feeling the bit, because otherwise you may push the second disc right out of position. Just try to bore the hole through. You can, if you don't have a 1/8 bit, you can do this with just ramming a skewer through, but it's a little bit more difficult, and it does seem to do a little bit of damage sometimes to the model. Like, not to anywhere else, but it can be sort of random, is kind of what I'm getting at. You can push this piece right off, or whatever. Not that you couldn't do that with the drill bit. So, now that we can definitely fit a bamboo skewer at least into there, if not right through there. And if you have a variety of thicknesses of bamboo skewer, make sure to use a quite thick one, because you're going to want to be able to insert a little bit of skewer in there quite easily without any pressure. And then before we go any further, we need to trim these back a bit again, so you can have a nice flat gluing plane. going to half another one of these, or actually marginally over half for each side. There we go. We're just going to install those behind here as well. So on top of the one we just pulled the pin off, or yeah, I guess they're not technically pins. Now if there's a little bit of a gap at the bottom there that you can still see, it's not a big deal. That will disappear eventually with layers of paint, glue and stuff. So yeah, just lock it in place like you did the last one. You might want to move this around between positions until you can see everything's nice and tight. And I'll just quickly do the other side. And once you have it to this point, if you remember hardening the top before we installed the first layer of rear hull detailing, we're going to do that to the bottom now that these cardboard parts are installed. Oh, great. Okay, hold on a second. Keep these out of the way for now. So those won't need too long to set. We're just putting glue on them anyway, so it's not like we're going to really damage them. So I'm going to put away the 4:1.